go right ahead and get into this first segment, which is covering the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. Now, as I said previously in the last segment, the two teams involved in the trade were obviously the Knicks and the Timberwolves. However, there was a third team involved, and I'm just going to go ahead and give the entirety of the trade details. So the Knicks, the third team that was involved, it was Charlotte. The Charlotte Hornets ended up acquiring a couple of picks and a couple of players from the Knicks in this exchange. So in order to complete this big trade, the Knicks and the Timberwolves had to get a third team, which was Charlotte, to sort of absorb some players into their cap space and allow the salaries to match. And this is... We're seeing a lot more three-team trades going around, and we're seeing a lot more sort of balanced trades to try and avoid that second apron or even that first apron with the luxury tax. And I do have a video explaining the second apron and the first apron for any of you guys who are curious about that. I do have that on the on our playlist, so you can go ahead and find that video if you guys are interested or have no idea how the second apron or the first apron work in the NBA. But essentially, if you go above the if you go above the salary cap for the season, that would be the first apron. Depending on how much you go up by, it depends how much tax you have to pay, which really a lot of owners don't want to do, because not only are they going to have to pay the team, they're also going to have to pay an huge extra amount of sum for going above the second apron, and more so going into the first apron, and then the second apron you have to pay way more. So it's like first apron is, some people find it tolerable. Second apron is where it's really, really bad. And that's basically just a sum up. Again, I have a whole video explaining that. So as a result of this trade, who are the players that the Hornets absorbed into their cap space? Well, the Hornets agreed to take 3 Knicks players, those 3 Knicks players being Charlie Brown Jr., Daquan Jeffries, and DeJuan Washington Jr., alongside 2 second-round picks from New York and 1 from Minnesota. So the entirety of the trade details, like the whole team, like the whole 3-team trade, Karl-Anthony Towns gets sent to the Knicks, then the Knicks send DiVincenzo, Julius Randle, and a first-round pick over to the Timberwolves, and then the Charlotte Hornets end up receiving the Charlie Brown Jr., Daquan Jeffries, DeJuan Washington, as well as 2 second-round picks and 1 from Minnesota, and that's the entirety of the trade details, according to The Athletic. So, as part of the deal, Knicks reportedly acquired the rights to James Njani from the Hornets as well in that exchange. And he is a center from Nigeria, and he was the 31st overall pick in the 2023 NBA draft. And he has been playing overseas recently, underwent back surgery, and is unlikely to play in the NBA this season. So essentially, the Knicks ended up getting nothing in that exchange. But again, it could end up being really good for them, because they do have a problem at the center right now, currently, because Mitchell Robinson is still injured, and it's most likely that he's not going to return until a few weeks. Nostalgic Nick is in the chat. Knicks, yep, I don't know, speaking of which, since you are here in the chat, how do you feel about this trade? Do you think you ended up winning the trade? Would you have rather had Randall on the team, or do you think Karl-Anthony Towns is a great fit for this Knicks roster? I'm sure you are bitter about DiVincenzo needing to get involved in that trade and going up. And Nostalgic Nick is in the chat responding, saying, we needed to give up $80 million. And yeah, that is what you sort of need to sort of avoid that second apron and avoid that luxury tax. So I guess it's like it's something that how should I say this? You don't want to do it because it hurts you personally, but you know it needs to be done. That's sort of how this trade sort of feels like. It's from Knicks fans at least. Now, in the Timberwolves' perspective, I'm still sort of curious how Julius Randle is going to really fit in that system along with Anthony Edwards. I think DiVincenzo is going to be a very solid three-point shooter for the Timberwolves. And Nostalgic Knicks responding in the chat, we traded Dante at his highest value. Yeah, that is very true. However, the question is is Karl-Anthony Towns really worth all of this? That's my question around this sort of trade, because it is a very hefty trade for someone that isn't really that popular of a center. And I feel like the Knicks would have been title contenders anyway without Karl-Anthony Towns, but this does sort of match up pretty well against the Boston Celtics, which is sort of, I'm assuming that's sort of what they're going for here with this trade, you know, to try and space the floor out just as well as the Boston Celtics are able to space the floor out while still having good defensive matchups against the Celtics. Because, I mean, let's face it, that team has a very, very dangerous starting five. Anyone can go off in that starting five. And the Knicks, they sent Julius Randle and DiVincenzo on the lottery picks for that trade, and this is basically like the entire trade for the entire finalized trade, and it doesn't really seem like many people are. I don't know if people are scared of the Knicks, like with Karl-Anthony Towns. I mean, they weren't really. I wouldn't say they were overly scared of them when they had Randle, but I don't really think adding how should I say? I don't really think adding Karl-Anthony Towns makes them that much scarier, if that makes sense, compared to when they had Randle and DiVincenzo. I'm not entirely sure how this trade is going to work, but this is sort of going to be one of those trades similar to, ironically, Minnesota's trade acquiring Rudy Gobert. This is going to be seen as like a really big, risky trade that we won't have the full details of whether or not it's good or bad until we actually see it put into practice, until we see how the rotations work, and until we see like how Karl-Anthony Towns actually fits in this entirety, in this Knicks offense. Now, I don't know if he's going to try and take on a little bit of a lesser role, considering like the talent that they do have. Jalen Brunson is a phenomenal player, as well as having Mikal Bridges, who can also be a phenomenal offensive player as well. I'm sort of curious to see how Karl-Anthony Towns is going to mesh with that piece, not to mention the fact that Karl-Anthony Towns per 100 possessions, at least on the Timberwolves, wasn't all that good defensively. And again, this I said this before in the previous podcast, you're trading a not really good playoff performer again for another not really good playoff performer. So it's like, it's really difficult. And yes, it is pick and pop all day, as Nostalgic Nick says in the chat. However, you got to make those threes as well. And like, you know, Karl-Anthony Towns, he is the best big man three-point shooter. I'm not knocking any sort of disrespect like that. However, in the playoffs, that three-point shooting and that shooting in general sort of just, for lack of a better term, falls off a cliff. Especially in the last series, where it was like, in the last playoff series that they played against the Dallas Mavericks, it was very, very underwhelming coming from both Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns. And a lot of that had to do with the efficiency that they displayed over on the court. So it's going to be very interesting to see how both of these two favor in their new situation. I do think, however, Julius Randle is probably going to play a lot better in the postseason than the Timberwolves, mainly because of how the media is compared to how the media is in New York. Like, all the attention that you're going to get in the Garden, that brings a lot of pressure. Compared to the pressure that you're going to get playing in Minnesota, not that much. You can make the argument now, however, because of Anthony Edwards and just how popular the Timberwolves have become. But I don't really think all the eyes are going to be on you in Minnesota nearly as much as all the eyes are going to be on you in New York. Like, that's just the mecca of basketball for a reason. So it could, again, I could be wrong. Could end up being good, could end up being bad. We'll see. But those are the full trade rumors. And that's all I have for this first segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the second segment, where I do a little bit of a recap of all the WNBA games, all the WNBA playoff games that went down yesterday. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign.